Hi, my name is Célya Gruson. I am a consultant and a research practitioner at InnoCube, which is a consulting company in open source, open data, and open science. And today I will present a research project. The name is FACT, the Fair API Commitment to Trust Model. And this model, the goal is to improve trustworthy and sustainability of digital infrastructures. This is a collective project with Mehdi Medjawi, which is a co-organizer of Apidays, but also the founders of a non-profit organization called Les Mainteneurs, the Mainteneurs. And I was working also with my colleague, Benjamin Jean, with lawyers and expert of open source. And in this project, we started it now more than 2 years ago, and we have already done a presentation during API Days Paris in 2021, and it was just the beginning of the project. And today, my presentation will present you the result of this study and also the framework and the wizards that we built on API terms of service. All our project is related to API terms of service. There is, for example, this project, this great initiative, TOS-DR, terms of service didn't read, which shows the fact that often we don't read the terms of service of any contract, any website, but also of the API. And this is a big issue. Why it's a big issue? Because it creates some inequalities in digital infrastructures in API ecosystem. That's why we answer to a project, a funding project. It was a grant from Ford Foundation, Alfred Sloan Foundation, Open Collective, Open Society, and Omidyar Network. And this grant, the goal is to make the web's open source infrastructure more equitable. That's why we answer to this grant with a special focus to API term of services, API TOS. Why? Our basic mission and with this project was that we did an observation that often in API ecosystem there are a lot of inequalities. For example, with Twitter, now X, in 2002, there was some change in the API and it destroyed a lot of business. Rapid change can destroy a lot of business because the API is not adapted anymore to the business and to the business model of some company. Even if in 2015, the CEO of Twitter said, look, API ecosystem and API user are really important. We will build more trust in this in our API. But again, in 2018, there was some change. And in 2023, you know, after that Elon Musk became the CEO, there were a lot of change and also a big change for us as a researcher, because I'm working with academics and I'm working as a researcher. There was a big change because the condition to access to API for researcher changed drastically. And Twitter for researcher in social science is really an important database. We can do a lot of research based on Twitter data to understand like fake news, to understand political movement and so on. And this change creates a lot of difficulties for researchers. For example, some PhD students were working on API, on Twitter API, and nowadays they can't anymore. Why? Because now the cost to access to API platform for research is more than $40,000 per month. And it's not possible even for a French university to pay this amount per month. That's why this example is to show you how a change in API terms of service in the condition can have huge impact in the whole ecosystem. I gave you the example of academic research, but it's the same in finance, in transport, and a lot of fields. That's why our project was to create more sustainable and trustworthy digital ecosystem. And our question is, how can we use API terms of service as a leverage for that? Why API terms of service as a leverage? Because all API has these terms of condition. And in this document, you have all the legal, technical, and business rules. It's a contract. And it's usually it's easily accessible in the web page of the API. And also, it is at the interaction and with other documents and legal and policies agreements. That's why API terms of service can be a leverage for a better condition and relationship between API user and API providers. And our goal was to build a framework to make also API terms of service easily understandable and shareable. Why? Because often, and it's one of the results of our survey, we conducted surveys, we conducted interviews, workshops, and one of our results is that nobody is reading the API terms of service because it's too complex to understand. It's a long document. It's also legal vocabulary, and nobody is reading that. And moreover, after, if there are some changes, it's often people can have some news, notification from emails, but it's difficult to understand when the change will happen and what are also the consequences for a business. That's why these are creating a lot of inequalities and friction between API providers and API users. And what we have seen also that there are a lot of pressure for API consumers due to the business and strategic decision of this big platform, often API providers, the big API providers. And for also small stakeholders, these conditions are really, really difficult to fit, and there are difficulty to participate in this API digital ecosystem. And moreover, there is often a lack of communication between API providers and API consumers. I will give you again an example of a researcher that we interviewed, and he was saying that it's really depending of the platform, but sometimes we are submitting a document we submit something to be part of the API, and we have no communication, no phone number if they say no. We don't know why, and sometimes we can't do research in, for example, Facebook or Twitter or other platforms because we can't communicate with them. And this is a big asymmetrical relationship of power. In our study, what we have done these interviews, this survey, but we also built some persona, like some profile of API providers, API users, stakeholders also, which are regulating API ecosystem. And we try to look at the pain points, the friction points in the user journey when we are building, for example, an API. And what we have noticed is that during the legal review, it's really a moment with a lot of frictions. It's difficult to contact, for example, the legal department for API product manager. Then it's difficult to review the document. And again, when there are some change of the condition, it's difficult to change the terms of service, to update it, then to notify all the consumers. That's why these frictions are often present in all the cases that we've studied. And our goal was to see which improvement we can make with the API terms of service. And based on the survey, we got three main improvements possible. The first one was to enhance trust between API providers and API consumers. The second one is really this idea to get this document easy to understand is to simplify the contracted process of implementing also this API and to understand after this API terms of service. And the third one was to enable the creation and the sustainability of a larger API ecosystem. And with this idea to build a framework, we got a lot of inspiration from different initiatives. The first one we have been inspired us from the beginning is Creative Commons, the Creative Commons license. I think you know a bit about Creative Commons license, but let me give you a small summary. These licenses are used when you want to share some document, like a photo, a presentation, an article, like in research, we are using a lot this license. This license gives everybody some rights about your work. Like, for example, in this case, you can share an article with a CC BY share alike license, which means that if people want to use your work, they want to cite you as the author of this work, and if they want to modify a bit something in your work, they are to share their modification in the same condition. That's why it's the notion of share alike. And you can see 3 pictos, easy to understand. And you can do some different choices. You go to the Creative Commons website and you choose if you want to allow adaptation of your work, which is adaptation, it's share alike or not. If you want that people allow to modify your work, it's non-derivative work or not. Or if you allow commercial use of work. That's why it's some simple and condition. And after, you just have to click. You will have this license and these icons generated. And after, behind it, you have a contract, legal contract. And moreover, you have something which is also readable for a machine. Because you have also in this picto all the metadata related to this license. That's why this work, Creative Commons license, was really our inspiration for what we want to build. But there were also other work like script permanent, which allow to compare 2 versions of terms of condition, terms of service, and other work, of course, TOSDR, and also open ethics. And based on that, what we have done, we based this framework. The name is FACT, for Fair API Commitment to Trust. And we will deep dive into this document by going in the website we built. This is the website of APItos project. And you can also look at our reports on this study. And what you can do also is you can explore this, this document and this framework. It's easy. You have 2 default conditions that you have to accept. Then you have 5 options. It's a different condition. And this framework will generate automatically a terms of service, a legal document that you can use, but also some pictos, some icons you can easily share after on your website. The 2 default conditions is the base of a trustworthy relationship between API providers and API users. And it is kind of engagement for the API providers, and on the other side, for the API user. For the API user, when they agree to use the API, they will agree to have a fair use of this API. And they have to adhere to some instruction regarding storing, copying, updating the API content. That's why if you use this API, you have to agree with that as an API user. If you are the core API provider, you also engage yourself to respect some important condition for the change policy. And you say that you have to have like a change policy which is fair, and that any change have to be transparent and protect also the interest of the user of the API. That's why, based on these two default conditions, you have some options, 5 conditions, and for each condition, you have different options with different level of rights to the API user, with these 3 different colors. The 5 conditions is API access, API specification, ethical data policy, loyal output policy, then reference and attribution. For API access, it's the condition to access the API, okay? And the first one, it's the default one, is API neutrality, that everybody can access with any specific identification, for example, to the API. Then you can choose other options as an API provider when you want to develop this, to build this API terms of service, like share alike. It's really related to Creative Commons share alike, that if you are applying this share alike, which means that all the API on its data must be licensed under a compatible license. And sometimes you can also decide to have some restrictive rights. For example, always with my example of a researcher, you will give access to the API or some part of the API only for the researcher, or public research, for example. After, the other condition is the specification. What are the conditions to access and reuse the API specification? There are 2 options, the CC0 license and again the share alike license on the specification this time. Then the 2 other conditions is ethical data policy and loyal output policy. The ethical data policy, it's related to the condition to reuse the data which are exposed via the API. And the first option, the default option, is a large data reuse. Then you can be more specific with the second option and say that all the data after and the data binding and this content has to be related to an open data contract. Or, on the other side, you can also have a commercial data contract. Then for the loyal output policy, again, it's about commercial or non-commercial reuse, and sometimes also the API user must engage that he will not have some behavior that is directly in competition with the core API provider. And the last one is the reference and attribution. It's a condition to cite data on services enabled via the API, and you can have the default is to attribute the work, and sometimes you can have no attribution, or in other case, you can have trademark enforcement. And with all these conditions, it's easy. You just have to click. For example, if I am like free software developers and I'm developing some API, I have to click on yes for the default condition. Then I will click on share alike, for example, open data contract, all commercial reused, and no attribution. And after, you can just create your API terms of condition. You can download the picto, which are after there. And here. And it's really the two first icons are about fair use and loyal change policy. Then it's a different option. And you can download the contract, which is this big legal document with all the different options related to the option that you choose. And that's why with the icons, it's really easy to understand. And yes, to understand all the methodology we use and why we did this work, how we did it, you can look at all our reports, and there are more details. You can have a look, and I hope it will be useful for you. And we are eager to have some comments, some feedback about the use of this fact wizard. And if you think that the conditions are kind of related to what you are doing, or if something is missing, please let us some comments. It will be really useful for the next version of this fact framework and this fact wizard. Thank you for your attention, and you can contact us at this address, apidays.org, contact@apitos.org. Thank you.